So this talk is called When in Rome. I think maybe I should have been a bit more creative when creating this title of this talk to attract a few more people. It doesn't really say much about what it is the talk is about. Anybody in here who are familiar with this saying, who knows what comes after the three dots? Anybody? Yeah? So you know that it's, well, we'll get to that. My name is Søren Beck, Jensen. I'm the founder and CEO of Jensen Technologies, which is a company based in Spain. We are the developers of Component Creator, which you may know, and NanoTranslate, which is translation software for Joomla. I sit on the board of Joomla as the department coordinator for legal and finance. There's some contact information in case you want to get in touch with me. Anyway, so when in Rome, do as the Romans do. That's a very famous saying. I know it in Danish, my native tongue, and I know it in English. So I know it's a pretty global saying. It actually comes from St. Ambrose, who said, if you should be in Rome, live in the Roman manner. If you should be elsewhere, live as they do there. And that's actually said at about 370 AD, he was writing something like that. He's a patron saint of Milan, I think, where he lived. And so he was talking about far away in Rome, if you're going to Rome, do as they do there. So basically, what he's saying is, behave as those around you do, and conform to the larger society, and respect the beliefs and customs and practices of a local culture. Now, all of these three on first read-through might seem like, yeah, that's reasonable. But when you really start thinking about it, which I did when I was making these slides, behave as those around you do, to me is a little bit, the worst thing about that is a little bit boring. It's more fun when people behave a little bit different and stand out, and you know, I like variety. Conform to the larger society. I think we've seen pretty big problems happening in history when everybody kind of blindly have followed a leader and conformed to what other people around them did. So I'm not necessarily sure that's a good thing to do either. This is my personal belief. Now the last one, initially, I was saying, yeah, totally. This one I can get behind. Respect the beliefs, customs and practices of local culture. And I would say 99% of the time, I agree, but then you start talking about female genital mutilation, you start talking about various other things that happen and are natural in some cultures, but that I cannot get behind and I cannot support. But largely, we should respect the beliefs, customs, and practices of local culture. So this is my personal kind of belief, and this is the story of me, a Dane moving to Spain, a Dane in Spain, and coincidentally, that is also my GitHub username, a Dane in Spain. So if you want to see what I'm doing in GitHub, you can look me up there.
Do you mainly stay on the plane?
Huh?
Do you mainly stay on the plane?
Or make it rain? No, I'm not sure about that. So, Denmark, Danish culture. I was born and raised in Denmark. Denmark is a very homogenized society where everybody are pretty similar and very, I'm not going to say boring, but square and very similar. I started doing web development for a company. I was hired all the way back in 1994. And so I kind of grew up, I was quite young back then, believe it or not, but I kind of grew up in Danish business culture. And the way things work there. I remember my boss said, and he really meant it, and I really mean that today in my business, that coming to work should first and foremost be fun. And that was kind of the culture, and it's kind of set the precedent for how, yeah, I grew up as an employee, and later now I'm a boss, and I try to inflict fun on my employees. And so this Danish business culture, and this talk is kind of about what happened when this kind of naive Dane moved to Spain. In 2005, I moved there, And I started doing web development there. At first it was just me, but later I got employees and I started growing the business. And this talk is gonna, to some people, maybe appear a little bit like it's a critique of Spanish culture or anything like that. And I just want to stress, first and foremost, I love Spain. I love many things about Spain. I love living in Spain. I have just discovered some things that have created some culture clash, and that is what I'm highlighting today. I could have highlighted twice as many positive and wonderful things about Spain. So, one of the things that is very different between Denmark and Spain is corruption. There's something called the CPI index, which is the corruption perception index. And in that index, all the countries of the world are listed dependent on basically how corrupt they are. It's very hard to measure how corrupt a country is for natural reasons. But so what they measure is how perceived is the corruption in a country. And on that list, Denmark is number 1. It is the least corrupt country in the world. That's what I grew up with. That is my culture. That is where I come from. And I think it would be fair to say that that makes you a little bit naive. Spain on that list is number 41. Right after Botswana, or a little bit worse than Botswana. And you might think that is bad, but Italy is number 60 on that list. So one day I was visiting, one of the first year I was doing business, I was visiting with my gestor, and that year we had done some investment, and there were some things that kind of made him pose this question to me. How much do you want to pay in tax this year? And I was just like, what? And basically he said, yeah, how much do you want to pay in tax? Because we can move some things around, and really you don't have to pay. And he's like an official person, and he's giving me this tax advice. And for me, that was in Denmark that would never have happened. But here it was just like, yeah, we can move some things around. We don't have to do it totally legally, but no, nobody cares. Everybody does it. And to me, that was a big surprise. And you might ask, what's a gestor? Because that's what I did the first time I heard. It's not a lawyer. It's not an accountant. A gestor is a licensed professional dealing with state-related paperwork. We don't have those in Denmark, because basically the government tried to make everything as easy as possible, and you deal directly with the government through various website portals and stuff like this. But in Spain, you need a licensed professional to deal on your behalf with all the paperwork and all the bureaucracy that exists in Spain. And as you can see, bureaucracy is the opposite of efficiency, and that's certainly something I have felt, and something that has been a huge frustration for me as a Danish person moving into Spanish corporate life, if you want. So I have a little video I would like to play for you. And really, this is a very, very true experience. I have experienced more or less exactly this, not as funny as this, by going to Spain and applying for, whoops, hold on. Is there any way I can click on this without it moving? There we go. I hope there's going to be sound on this.
Espera un momento.
Quería darme de alta en autónomos.
Ventanilla de información, modelo TA1. Lo cumplimenta en esa mesa y después.
Me he traído relleno.
No ha rellenado esa casilla. Vaya a las mesas de la entrada y...
He traído 2 copias, escritas y revisadas.
Le falta el impreso de Hacienda. Y la fotocopia. Muy bien, Rubita. Tú lo has querido. Fotocopia del DNI. Número de cuenta. Fotocopia de la tarjeta de la Seguridad Social. Fotocopia de los impresos de Hacienda. Doble fotocopia del modelo 036, numerado y grapado.
So this was kind of a humorous version of this, but I can tell you, as Lily, who's sitting here, my partner in life, we've just had a son and we had to get him registered for his paperwork to being a citizen. And we went through this several times because you get bounced around from one office to another and they're like, oh, you don't have this stamp or you don't have this paperwork. And it took us, I don't know, 8 visits to different offices and several months to get his paperwork. And that's natural. That's any kind of paperwork you need, and it really works like that. And for me as a Danish person, that is completely the opposite in Denmark. And that's been one of my big frustrations. And in the beginning, I got so frustrated with this. I got so frustrated with all these things that were different. And I guess that's really what I'm getting at in this talk is maybe you should not be so frustrated. Let's see. One of my other frustrations was when I started getting employees in my company. I love my employees, especially one of them standing next to me in the picture, who is also my partner in life. But I really do love my team, but it has been a very frustrating experience, especially the time management. Being in Denmark and being Danish, when we agree to meet in a bar, a restaurant, a train station, whatever, at 5:10, then we meet at 5:10. If you're more than 5 minutes late, you call. And that's the way it is. In Spain, it is completely different. You are allowed at least 15 minutes to be late. I would assume it's probably the same here in Italy. To be late without giving any reason, any apology, or calling ahead, or anything like that. And for me, that drove me nuts in the beginning. So in Denmark, when that comes to the workplace, we have freedom with responsibility. You can come a little late if you want, that's okay, because you can take personal time. So if you want to go get your hair cut, go to the dentist, something like that. Not every job is like that, but that's what I grew up with. And we had that freedom. But on the other hand, it was required of us, if we were not required but expected of us, that if we had a deadline and we were falling short of that deadline, yeah, then you stay a little late and you finish it. Sometimes I remember working till midnight and getting pizzas and just getting the job done, but we had that freedom. And to me, that felt wonderful. I wanted that freedom. I thought I had the best job in the world because I had that freedom. So you can kind of say the basic philosophy in Denmark, and I'm not sure it's the right one, but it is largely the philosophy that people live to work. So they love their work so much that they first and foremost, they exist to work, they live to work, right? In Spain, things are different. I tried, when I came there naively and I started getting my employees, I tried to give them freedom with responsibility. Same as we had in Denmark. And I said, listen guys, you can come a little late if you want. And they were like, thanks, we'll come late every day. And so in the beginning I was like, okay, up to 15 minutes, I said. And they came 15 minutes on the dot late every single day, every day. And I remember fighting this, and I was like, if you come 15 minutes late every day, it's because you start 15 minutes late driving to the office. So just start 15 minutes early and you'll be here on time. It's not different. And they were like, nah, but it's okay. You're allowed to be 15 minutes late. It's not a problem. Yeah, but I said, no, it's not a problem. Unless you do it every day, then there is a problem. And they were like, no, we're not going to change that. I said, okay, well, then I'll make the start time 15 minutes later. We all start 15 minutes later. That's fine. And they're like, but then we'll just come 15 minutes later than that. And they were like, don't expect us to arrive on time. And that was a hard pill for me to swallow. And then I said, okay, if you're going to arrive late, then stay late if we have a deadline. And they said, nah, our contract says that we end at this time. So, of course we're going to leave at this time. I have had a really hard time to try and get my employees to put in the extra effort. And so this has been a conflict for me. But on the other hand, I think the Spanish culture, maybe the Latin culture, I don't know, maybe it's like this in Italy, but it's more work to live. You go to work so that you can make a living, and your life is after work or before work, but it's outside of work. And honestly, I kind of like that. So, you have to you can't get both worlds, right? So the labor law in Spain has not been reformed for many years, and there really are some problems with it. One of them is that in my company we don't do it, but one of them is that there's still siesta in many companies, and that means that there are 4 rush hours instead of 2. It also means that some poor people, because there's 3-hour break in the middle of the day, so some people live so far from work that it's not feasible for them to return to home in those 3 hours. So their work day just gets filled with 3 hours in the middle of the day to take a long lunch. Maybe, I was going to say go around shopping, but you can't because the shops are closed, So it just fills in 3 hours, so you work from 9 in the morning till 10 in the evening. And so for me, siesta is not the best thing. Also, there's something called jornada intensiva, which is something that happens in August where employers or employees are supposed to work earlier and finish earlier and not take lunch. And they work slightly less hours in the month of August, and it's all to do with the heat. But if you work in an office, it really has no impact, but it's there historically from people working in the fields or whatever, and it makes very little sense to me, and it lowers, both of these two things lowers productivity greatly in Spain. Another thing we have is we have really bad laws for people who want to start businesses. You have to pay like a fixed, like almost 300 euros every month, no matter if you have a loss in a month, you still have to pay that amount. In Jensen Technologies, after several years of doing this and giving and taking and figuring out and balancing, we've come up with some rules that works for us. And really, I guess that could be the take-home of this talk, is that you have to do some compromises when two cultures are conflicting in this. So we have something called flex time. And that means you can come a little late if you want. I finally said, okay, come a little late. But you have to leave a little later on that day. When we first started doing that, each employee was tracking their own time. It was like, oh, I came 20 minutes late this morning, I'll leave 20 minutes later. Fine, no problem. But it became a nightmare for me to try and did that guy come a little earlier today so he can leave earlier, or because that's something you can do as well. So actually on the suggestion of my project manager, he said, listen, we need to track this time. We need to have like they do in factories in Denmark is what I saw. It's like a stamp in and a stamp out. Have a little bit more advanced system with a phone that you scan a QR code as you come in and you scan it again when you leave. But we have implemented this. And to my big surprise, all the employees were like, great, no problem, I have no problem with it. If I tried to do that in a Danish company with Danish IT workers who are used to office work, they would revolt. They would be like, are you kidding me? Am I going to stamp in, stamp out? No, I'm not. They want the freedom. It really seems like my employees, at least in Spain, don't. And then I say, okay, and if we have a deadline, please, could you stay a little late so we can finish it? And they still say, nah, I don't think so. I gotta go home. My contract says it stops now. I'm sorry, dude. Well, very, very few times have I asked employees to stay late. And the few times that I've really insisted, it has happened, but generally it's something I don't do because it creates conflict and it's not something that the employees want to do at all. And we don't have siesta in my company. Yay. Sick days is another thing that was difficult for me to get my head around. I've kind of always had some employees who've come to me and said, Søren, you really need to do it the Spanish way. You can't, you know, the way you're doing it the Danish way, the freedom you're giving us, we're taking advantage of it. So I had employees come and tell me, you can't do it like you do in Denmark, where you just call and say, hey, I'm sick today, sorry, I can't come. And I said, why can't I? Well, because people are just going to call in and say they're sick, they can't come. In Spain, the traditional way is, if you're sick, you go to the doctor, you get a note, and you bring that in. And I just found that so restrictive and so backwards and so untrusting and counterproductive, especially in the kind of climate that I would like to create in my company. So I never implemented this. Until my sick days started to look like that. And these are actually real numbers. It started skyrocketing. There were some employees who had, on a natural month, 4 or 5 sick days. And in the end, I decided to, right around here, implement the Spanish system. If you're sick, actually I said, the first 5 days a year is fine. After that, if you're sick, bring in a note. And we have now dropped to practically not having any sick days. So I think in Denmark, it's more the carrot than the stick. And in Spain, it's more the stick than the carrot. And I think that the conclusions are that you should not try and fight local culture, business culture. But if there's something you really believe in, then fight it. For me, the first and foremost still counts, and in the company, and my employees are greatly happy about that. It has to be fun to come to work. And we still do that, and that is something I have fought for, and I've tried to maintain as much freedom as possible. And you should embrace the differences. It has taken me a long time to get to that, where I'm like, okay, let's do it your way. And so I think it should be, when in Rome, enjoy your stay and embrace the fact that the world is not yet 100% homogenized. Embrace the fact that we are different and don't try to fight it. Thank you very much.